fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire.
Fuel, the podcast for fixing underperformance and evolving leadership within the automotive industry. Fuel is bringing you the latest in proven strategies and techniques that can take your service department to the next level.
Welcome back to Fuel. I'm Alex Keith. I'm your host, and with me again is James Grogan. James, say hello.
Hello, round two. Thanks for having me back.
Perfect. So remember, last time we talked about pricing compliance, how to become perfectly priced. We noted a couple key things. You got to know where the market's at by either using some kind of phone call or you kind of mystery shop, and then you're establishing, how you're becoming perfectly priced, with certain metrics. What kind of ELR, labor gross profit, retail prices, things like that. And that's where the analytics come into play. And then we tied that back up with timeline. When do we want to reevaluate this perfect price that we have established? And that's every 4 to 6 months. So expanding onto that today, I want to jump right into labor matrixing. Part of that perfect pricing using analytics. And what is labor matrixing? How can it perfectly, tune your pricing structure to benefit your store in your market? So I know there's a couple of terms.
We had a live chat. I feel like it would be popping off during this episode.
Yeah, I think it would blow up.
Labor matrices, for some reason, always seem to be controversial. Is not maybe the best word to use, but people have very strong opinions one way or the other. And it's always interesting as we do go through educations on stuff like this, how those opinions tend to come out. So
absolutely. And I think it's like that word flush. Snake to snake oil type comparison. It's like I don't really understand, like you don't want to go that route with it because of words or experiences and things like that. So understanding labor matrixing is the same mentality of understanding perfect pricing. It's dialing in the maximum you can charge for the best value that you can give the customer, right? The maximum we can charge with the least amount of negative impact as well. And essentially if you're defining a labor matrix, again, the way I would look at it is a pricing structure that allows maximum profitability, but it's also in relation to the type of work you see. So I would say your labor mix. What kind of labor mix do you have? Do you have a front end labor mix, 1, 2, 3 hours type of repairs? Do you have a back end labor mix? We're seeing a lot of heavy mechanical repairs, or do you have somewhere in between, kind of an overall labor mix? So understanding a pricing structure to maximize that profitability in relation to your labor mix, but then also in relation to the skill level of some of those jobs when your higher paid technicians are getting involved and how often are they getting involved.
Strategic profitability.
I like that.
Strategic profitability. That's what I always related to. Here's the deal. I equate it back to, you can equate it back to a lot of industries, but your general practitioner, they're not going in and they're not doing spine surgery. Right? They're not going in and doing hip replacements. They're not going in and doing, brain surgery. Like there is a specialist with training and certifications and experience. And guess what? They're probably more expensive. Actually, I know they're more expensive.
Exactly.
Right? So
it's a huge difference there.
And I feel like sometimes in the automotive industry, one price fits all. And it's like, well, wait a minute. One price fits all, but don't you have a guy who specializes or girl who specializes in diesel, who's certified in diesel, who has X years of experience in dealing with, electrical or with AC, and is that technician, is that skill on par with the general practitioner, the C-level tech that maybe is 6 months out of quick lane, right? Probably not. No, they're not. You pay them more. So why would you give them work that you technically lose profit on because of how good they are? To me, it never made sense. So I always just called it strategic profitability.
A strategic profitability. Yeah. I really like that. And I think, understanding, that we do pay our technicians separately, and whether anybody likes labor matrixing or not, I'm here to tell you, unfortunately, you're already on a matrix, whether you like it or not. You already are. I mean, our pricing structures are different. You don't charge the same that you would do a oil change to a brake job. You're just not going to do that, right? You're not going to charge the difference between doing a brake job and putting in a caliper or putting in a master cylinder. And you're definitely not going to let the guy who's really good at oil changes perform a master cylinder or caliper replacement. So if you don't think you're on a matrix, you already are. So what are we talking about with labor matrixing? Well, we are talking about a focus. We are starting to focus in labor pricing for a consistent area. And that area that we're going to be discussing is mechanical base repair. Mechanical base repair, labor matrixing. And the benefit of doing that, again, is understanding your labor mix. Is going to help you understand what type of work you see in your shop a lot better than just having an idea. Yeah, well, I think we're around here, or do you know? That's going to be a key thing.
I think it's important you brought that up because it is repair that we want to discuss. We're not going to talk about putting a matrix in on maintenance items. We're not going to put a matrix in on competitive stuff like oil changes, tire. No, what we're going to talk about today is why do we need to put in a labor matrix, or what you'll hear it called as variable pricing strategy sometimes, for your repair work.
And understanding the benefits of doing that for profitability. And again, it's a sweet spot method. It's a perfect pricing method. It's charging the maximum we can charge with the least amount of negative impact to our customers. But it also, in some cases, gives us the opportunity to roll into something. Now, I'm going to discuss this later on, so I'm not going to get too far into it. But understanding a perceived discount or adjustment versus a true discount or adjustment. So we'll get into those a little bit further later on the podcast. So you got to subscribe. You got to keep listening if you want me to dive into that. But labor matrixing is really it's designed to help you stay profitable and understand and have more awareness of what kind of labor jobs you're doing and what type of technicians are doing those jobs on a scale basis. When do we start seeing them getting more involved in certain heavy labor work, and then how can we tune in our effective labor rate and labor gross profit? So when you're looking at a labor matrix, you have to have technology. You have to. Okay. Unless you really, really want to sit there and finger through all these ROs and figure out and document it and put your little spreadsheet together, more than welcome to. I mean, I know the one thing everybody's running out of is time. So I don't think that would be the method, but technology is going to be key. So within the EBIS tool, we have the grid frequency report that's under the ELR manager. And what this report allows us to do is see how our labor mix runs out. Now, James, let me pick your brain on this one. If you were going to look a batch of data, right, and you're trying to find out maybe some of the highs and lows of your business, what do you think a good time frame would be to look at? As far as just a month? Would you think 3 months? 6 months? What kind of time frame?
Yeah, I think I would default to 90 days, depending on when I was doing my review.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if I'm doing my review at the first of the year, I don't know that I would do 90 days because you have the holidays. You have, some people aren't going to spend money during Christmas, but some people are going to spend a ton of money because they're about to go on the road for Thanksgiving,
right?
Vice versa. I think 6 months is probably the most I would go back, right? So you could look at a month, get an idea. You could look at 90 days. I think 90 days is probably where I would go, most of the time. And then just be aware of, obviously, if I'm going 90 days and it's major holidays or, hey, I was closed for 2 weeks for a snowstorm.
Fluctuation. Fluctuation in the market.
Know your time. Yeah.
Fluctuation in the market. I think it's the same mentality when you're talking about parts, right? Sometimes parts are available and sometimes they aren't. And sometimes there's certain seasons for certain parts and things like that. I'm going to go out a step further. I'm going to say I like annual. I like 6 months, but I'm more of an annual based kind of guy because I want the total atmosphere. I want to understand when you're fully staffed, when you're not fully staffed, when you have vehicles coming in, getting out of your shop, and when you don't have vehicles coming in, the highs and lows in the season, the highs and lows in the summer months, in the vacation months and things like that, the tax season, things like that. Kids are going back to school. So how often do we see certain jobs in certain areas, and where's the sweet spot, so to speak? Where do we see the most jobs, and do we have a good mix, the front end or the back end?
I think there's also something you also want to think about is what are you going to be paying your technicians?
Exactly.
Because here's the deal. Once again, strategic profitability. So if I know I'm about to give all my technicians a raise, or I know I need to, or I know, hey, I'm going to hire in maybe a couple new technicians and I'm probably going to have to overpay, right? Because that seems to be where the market is currently. Well, once again, strategic profitability. Why would I not tweak my matrix to help offset that expense?
Yeah, because think
Right?
about how you did it before. What did we have to do before? Anytime we made any adjustments, well, we had to eat it until our annual review came up, where we're going to increase our door rate by $5 or $10 or whatever. And we're not going to give a raise and then increase our door rate. And most of the time, if you're going to give a raise, you want to plan for that, increase your door rate, and then roll that into the profitability analysis, right? Say, hey, how can we stay profitable? I think that's a huge benefit that you just brought up about the labor matrixing. You technically wouldn't have to change your starting rate depending on your labor matrix. You wouldn't have to change your rate. You could just fluctuate what kind of percentages of increases. We're retaining some more profitability to help us overcome some of those percentages to stay profitable. Stay profitable with what we're doing.
I think you could say, hey, I want to be at 76% gross profit on labor.
Exactly.
And you build out your matrix for that. So guess what? As the price of your technician, goes up, right? And let's be honest, we know there's still kind of a bidding war out there. So if you're priced right and you're practicing perfect pricing and you're practicing a labor matrix and strategic profitability, you can overpay a technician, because guess what? Now you just go in, tweak your labor matrix a couple percent. And I know we're going to talk about that next episode on the strategy behind that. But, if I know, hey, I need 3 technicians, and, I'm like, well, I normally pay them $25 an hour, but if I go pay 28, 29, I can get 3 guys in by the end of the month.
Exactly.
Well, pay them, tweak your grid.
Yeah.
Don't pay them and lose the profit. Pay them, tweak the grid. 1, visually, who's going to see it? 2, what's the impact of it? Probably not much, because it's a small percent. And then 3, you got 3 guys in the shop now turning extra hours, which means, guess what? Your advisors can sell more confidently. You're pushing more cars through the shop. And if you're doing this without perfect pricing and without a labor matrix,
it's hard.
I just going to say it. Yeah, because now what happens?
It's an immediate impact.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You said visual impact, and you keep saying tweaking. Yeah, that little tweak term. That's the tuning, right? That's where we talked about how do you to do some tuning, expert tuning for your business. Because let's face it, the visual impact of if you're at $120 today and then next month you're at $150 because you had to overcome that, I think people are going to notice that. They're going to start to notice where it starts to impact their business. I'm not saying we're trying to bait and switch or throw something over. No, we're still being fair. We're being perfectly priced. Remember, maximum increase, least amount of negative impact to our customer. So talking about a labor matrix, right? Like the importance of a labor matrix, to my extent, it does make you more aware of your labor mix in your service department as far as mechanical repairs. When you're on a matrix, you're going to be more aware of your business, where it's at, highs and lows, things like that. But the biggest thing is, let's say you're on the matrix. You go to a matrix, you've never been on one. You listen to this podcast, you're like, well, those guys have got it figured out. I better go to one of these, right? Remember that Fuel podcast that everybody's subscribing to? Hey, plug. So looking at this here.
Everybody.
Yeah, I think the biggest question I'm always asked when I'm talking to people about labor matrixing is, what's your door rate? What's your door rate? How do I answer that question when somebody comes up and says, what's your door rate? What's your labor rate? If we're in a variable pricing structure, I just tell them we're on a matrix. Do I tell them what we are? Oh. I wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't recommend telling them that you're on a matrix. People don't understand that. If you say grid, matrix, whatever.
So what do you say?
I would say we price by the job, because you brought up something earlier that was pretty a good tie into this. The medical field.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a broken shoulder and you need to go get your shoulder fixed, they don't break it down and say, well, I'm going to do 2 or 3 hours over here at this price and 2 or 3 hours over here. No. It's like, hey, it's $50,000 to fix your shoulder. Do you want it fixed or not? Like, that's kind of their mentality. Yeah. I think that's our mentality as well, because there are other factors sometimes that come into play. Additional time when we have to do certain things and additional labor that we have to bring up. So I would say, then if you go to a labor matrix and somebody presents that conversation, what is your door rate? Well, our diag charge is $100. That's what our diag charge is. Based off the diag, we charge by the job. Depending on what kind of repair you need, we will give you a quote for that repair. We charge by the job. But if you're looking for a rate, the rate that we talk to the customer about is their diagnostic charge.
When you go back to the health industry, the medical industry, the time that is quoted has nothing to ever do with expense. It's just an expectation of how long I'm going to have to sit and wait. Right?
Convenience fee.
Well, it's never, hey, it's never, here's the price to fix everything. And then, when you go into the surgery, they're like, oh, by the way, it's a 5-hour surgery. They don't go, because it's a 5-hour surgery, I'm going to charge X, right?
Correct.
It's never that way. So the 5 hours is just an expectation of how long everything's going to take, right? And it's the same thing on a labor matrix deal. If we're selling a job, it's not about the 3.9 hours times this is the price for the job.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but by the way, that job should only take probably about 4 hours to do once we get it in the shop, right? Yeah. It's the price should become about the wait time or the efficiency to the client, never the price.
Correct. Never the price. And I think the return date mentality of that is, here's the parts and labor for this job, or here's the total for this job out the door. Here's the return date that I can get it to you. Anytime that we give a time frame to a customer and we say, hey, that should only take about 2 hours to do. Well, if you come back in an hour, they're going to say, well, it only took an hour. Yeah. Well, you're going to charge me full price. Or you come back in 2.5 hours or 3 hours. What's taking so long? I got to go. I need my vehicle. So you never win, in my opinion. I mean, sometimes you get away with it, but I don't think you're going to win on majority. Customers are very hard as far as when it comes to convenience. They don't want to come to the dealership. They don't want to get stuff fixed. It's an inconvenience. It's like going to the dentist for them, it seems like, to some people. So the idea of it is when you're promoting perfect pricing, which we've talked about, when you're on a labor matrix, it allows you to dial that business in to the price that you give your customer. You give it to them with confidence, because not only are you perfectly priced, we're promoting the value of that. Got top tier technicians in here. You're in the top, I've got a nice clean waiting room. I've got loaner cars to take care of you. I've got a parts department, and you can go buy accessories for your store. I got a brand new showroom over here that you could come over here and take a look at new vehicles.
So I don't want to take us off topic, because I know we're going to talk about it more as we talk about labor matrixing and maintenances. But everything we do in the dealership has a time. Oil change has a time. Air filter in some cases has a time. Wiper, blah, 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 blah. Yet repair seems to be the only thing we quote time on.
Quote time is variable.
If we don't have a labor matrix, right? If we do a door rate, it's 4 hours at, right? And then if you say, well, we don't quote by time. Well, if you don't quote by time and you're not using a strategic profitability or variable pricing or whatever you want to call it, right? Then what you're doing is you are handcuffing your ability to earn profit, but yet still be competitive. Because guess what? Brake jobs are how much? Depends on the vehicle. So guess what? You have a variable pricing strategy for maintenance.
Exactly.
Why don't you have repair? But let's also say that I do my perfect pricing. I do my mystery shop. And I realize that I need to reduce my price on maintenance. Well, most people are going to go, man, if I reduce my price, I'm now losing profit.
Correct.
Which is true. It's simple math equation, right? Can't take a negative, right? But if I build my variable pricing strategy, especially on repair, where I can maintain a specific level of profit, then guess what? If I have to drop my brake price $10,
now you can incur it. Now you can incur the effect of that. So, I mean, I think that is the biggest benefit of understanding that you're already on a labor matrix. We're just focusing that into one key area. So kind of wrap things up here on this Fuel podcast, which again, we really appreciate all our listeners. Any feedback, we love hearing feedback. We love, dealing with that. Today what we discussed was, labor matrix pricing, how to perfectly tweak or perfectly tune your business, using a labor matrix. And some things that we pointed out is not having to consistently make huge visible changes, but having to change your door rate, having the understanding that technically you're already on a labor matrix. We're just focusing that into one area. And then understanding, like once you go to a labor matrix, it allows you to be perfectly priced, retain more effective labor rate, more labor gross profit, and it allows you to have better awareness of what type of hours you're seeing in your shop. It's just going to give you more oversight and more ability to stay in tune with your business.
I have one more comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I will bet You guys check out the show notes, check out the comments, send me an email if you think I'm wrong. But I would bet the stores that have an effective matrix, in other words, it's reviewed, it's monitored, it's measured, it's all that stuff, have a higher client retention than those that are on a straight door rate.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you because there's more value being promoted.
More value, and then also a straight door rate brings up way too many questions on pricing.
Yep.
So, sorry.
No, you're good. I think that's a great tie-in because one of the things we do, we want to recap. One of the things we brought up in the price optimization is timeline. So if we decide to go to a labor matrix, when are we going to the matrix, and how are we uploading that matrix? Now, if everybody based off this call, and as we roll into our next call, which is going to be I like to call in this one, James, you're going to like this one, the 3 bears of labor matrixing. So what labor matrix is the best?
Can't wait. I can't wait.
So when we go into that episode, it's going to be discussing timeline of introducing the perfect matrix for your store, but then also understanding, how do we upload it to our advisors? Do we put it in the DMS? Do we put it on their desktop and things like that? And how can they use that to the best benefit? So like always, guys and gals, if you're listening, please like, share, follow, subscribe. We'll have some meeting notes down at the bottom. Again, I'm Alex Keith. I'm your host. James, appreciate you joining me again.
Till next time.
Till next time. Have a good one.